cause is let's get the gang members out. Everybody agrees. But let's not innocent gay hairdressers get lumped up with the gangs.
Scott, look at me. Okay.
Yeah, let's give the host
you and I are talking.
respect.
You and I are
Let's give her
talking.
respect.
Okay.
All right, I think you're going to like this video because recently Joe Rogan on his podcast said it would be horrific if regular citizens were looped in together with gang members and were deported from the country or were being held in jail without due process or anyone knowing about it. So the entire media is really having a meltdown over this statement. However, we will be focusing on the most recent CNN meltdown about these comments. It's a really good one. Now, before we start the video, please like the video. It's the #1 way you can help this channel, and it helps others see the videos as well. Let us begin.
Isn't this exactly what we denounce other countries for doing? Not giving our own citizens, when they get wrongfully detained around the world, our own citizens, the due process that they deserve?
Well, I think multiple things could be true. Number one, I delineate between American citizens and everyone else. If you're a U.S. citizen, I put you in a different category.
On due process, that's not a distinction that the law makes.
Then if you've come here and broken our laws and committed violent acts or murder, whatever, I put you in a different category.
All right, now here's the part CNN is not telling you. There is a distinction when the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act has been invoked. This is because, as we know, Tren de Aragua falls under this category of a predatory incursion. So because of this, you now have 50 U.S. Code 21. Screenshot this, remember this. The president has total authority to deport or to not have this judicial process if they deem it necessary for public safety. And as we know, Tren de Aragua has been a public safety matter for a while now. So because of this is why the Trump administration has been able to get away with no due process because of this code, 50 U.S. Code 21. Remember this.
Law and due process. That is not a distinction.
Well, if you'd like to argue that Tren de Aragua should have the same rights and that you get as an American citizen, go ahead.
I don't change the Constitution.
Hold on a second.
The
argument
so
is
you're saying that a terrorist can walk across the border and become effectively a U.S. citizen?
That's not what I'm saying.
Hold on. Scott, look at me. Okay.
Yeah, let's give the host
you and I are talking.
respect.
You and I are
Let's give her
talking.
respect.
Okay.
Now, one thing I have to point out, to be intellectually honest, Joe Rogan was not even talking about Tren de Aragua. He's talking about regular citizens. Now, during this CNN conversation, they're even trying to loop in together, well, if you are a terror suspect or you are an illegal immigrant, regardless, you should have due process. We will talk about that later, but I want to make sure you know Joe Rogan is talking about real American citizens when you look at the context of his podcast.
Cause is let's get the gang members out. Everybody agrees. But let's not innocent gay hairdressers get lumped up with the gangs. And then, like, how long before that guy can get out?
What I'm saying to you is that the law does not make a distinction between U.S. citizens and everybody else when it comes to being accused of crimes. Are you saying that that should not be in place? That if you happen to not be a citizen, you get to be thrown into a jail with no process at all?
I'm saying that these people are effectively terrorists. They walked across our borders illegally.
Okay.
They are violent. And I don't really want them
here. But doesn't the government have to prove that they are who they say they are?
So you are probably catching on, the goalpost is shifting, and oftentimes on my channel, I show this, that Democrats or left-leaning media, they tend to shift the conversation because, objectively speaking, we all have to agree that it's illegal to enter the country illegally, but now the conversation is, well, why don't we have a due process? Why are they doing this so fast? Why don't we have the names of anybody? Recently, Tom Homan just talked about this, and I think we have some answers.
It's another activist judge making a stupid ruling. It just doesn't make sense. You know, I've been around since 1984, Lawrence, and a TPS, temporary protected status, is never temporary. And President Trump is going to do his job by the rule of law. The law says temporary status. Once the conditions in that country they're from, once the conditions change, then people should be removed from the United States. It's only a temporary status. For instance, if there's a hurricane and it devastates a part of a country, we'll give them TPS until that country gets back on their feet. But TPS isn't meant to be decades long.
You guys are going to find this incredible, and now everything makes sense. Why do we keep talking about Venezuelan deportations? Well, it turns out it's because Venezuelans hold the #1 status for TPS, Temporary Protective Services. Now, I want to make a distinction. I understand a lot of people have a moral compass when it comes to deportations. I know a lot of people struggle with the deportations. However, I'm talking objectively speaking here. When it comes to the legality of these deportations and not having a due process, there's no due process needed because it's a temporary status. Once that runs out, why do we have to go to court? The United States has deemed that's it, TPS is up, so you get deported. So now you can see these arguments from CNN and other left-leaning media and Democrats, these are not good arguments. The TPS is up. That's it. No more judiciary process.
Correct.
I
That's
think
all we're saying.
That's all.
I think.
I mean, you can say it
eventually,
it's not a concession that you like Tren de Aragua. It's just a question of the basics of civics in this country.
I think eventually the government will have to show all of its cards on everybody that they have detained, deported, or done anything to in this arena. But there is no doubt that the Trump administration is rounding up effectively terrorists who came across here illegally, committed horrific acts, and do not need to be in this country.
They are doing that, perhaps, but they're also doing a lot of other things, too. And that's why the courts are asking questions.
So as you can see, if anything, we are learning that the American court system is quite interesting and really up to self-interpretation at the end of the day, because I'm sure there's people watching this video who are not agreeing with anything I'm saying or are looking at the wording a little different as far as 50 U.S. Code 21. But let's get to what Republicans have to say about these judges either overreaching or making decisions that are not constitutional, because this happened very recently.
So, of course, they like some judge issuing orders or injunctions that stop the head of the executive branch from doing what he said he was going to do when he ran for the job and when the American people elected him. Think about it. Here in D.C., an elected judge thinks she's better equipped to determine military readiness than the commander-in-chief. An unelected judge in California thinks he gets to decide how many probationary employees work in the executive branch, not the guy who was elected to run the executive branch. Another unelected federal district judge here in D.C. thinks he gets to decide how long illegal gang member terrorists stay in our country, not the president, not the commander-in-chief. And now that same judge gets randomly assigned the Hexeth case, and he'll get to determine who the Secretary of Defense can talk to and how he has to do it.
Now again, the direct wording from 50 U.S. Code 21 is the president is authorized in any such event by his proclamation. And this means either deportations, and by the way, the president, if he wants, he is allowed to make a proclamation that he wants a specific suspect or somebody they deem necessary to go through a due process. But again, this is why the water is getting a little murky here, because what it turns out is we have a lot of either self-interpretation or we have a lot of political motives. I have no way to prove it. I'll leave that up to you guys. But again, a lot of evidence is showing we have a little bit of political motivation. This is why there is such a divide right now, especially in the court systems. And I think it's also very misleading because you have a lot of Democrats saying, yeah, we need to go through the court. But then on the Republican side, they're saying, no, we don't. We have special invocations where we don't have to go through the court. And now the Trump administration is being compared to like Russia and Syria for the actions they're taking, you know, as far as, you know, being a dictatorship or something.
So President Trump, who's promised American people, we're going to enforce the laws enacted by Congress and signed by the president. We're going to use the laws of this country to secure the border and enforce our immigration law. That's exactly what we're doing. TPS needs to be temporary in nature. We need to follow the rule of law and not some advice from an activist judge who makes a foolish ruling, not based on law, but based on opinion. If you look at that decision, it's based on opinion, not the rule of law, and that's what we need to get back to. So look, we'll litigate it and we'll appeal it and we'll win.
What is the crisis? I mean, he's effectively executing on the policy agenda that he ran on, and he's sitting at about 50%, which is far higher than the last president. If this is a crisis, what was the Joe Biden term? A mega crisis? I don't know.
I think the crisis is that we're seeing people deported without due process. We're seeing the very fundamental aspects of our democracy at question. That's what people are scared about.
Okay, if you are still watching this video, I would really like some participation as far as how you feel about the legality of what Donald Trump is doing and the non-legality of it. Because when you go to a Democrat, you're going to get a biased answer. Everything Trump does is horrible. Everything he's doing is illegal. When you go to a Republican, you can make the same, response, where Republicans will say, no, I love Donald Trump. I don't care. He's not doing anything illegal. So I had to go to AI and try to get an unbiased answer. By the way, even AI is biased. But what Grok is saying is what Donald Trump is doing is mostly maybe illegal. Again, take it with a grain of salt. Now, the reason why Grok is pretty split on this 40-60 is because when you go to the actual wording of the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, it is rather general or generic. So what Grok is saying is because of this, Donald Trump knows the majority of Americans support this. So there would be absolute outrage, which is what we're seeing, if judges get involved and judges try to stop this. Another really important point, and I actually think Grok hits this perfectly, is that we are seeing arguments of, well, this has not been invoked since World War II, and we know what that led to. It led to the camps of segregation, things like that. However, again, regardless of that argument, what the Trump administration is arguing today is it doesn't matter how old this law is because our Constitution is also old, and it doesn't necessarily matter what happened in World War II. What we're trying to say is this is currently the law, but regardless, Grok is saying this is why you're seeing some judges and some pushback from Democrats that, hold on, is this the law? Because it's a very general wording within the law. So again, please take this with a grain of salt. Let me know how you guys feel down below. I was just curious how AI felt about this. And to be honest with you, I was actually a little shocked by this answer. I thought we would be more in the legal standing, but I could see the reasoning and thinking why we can get into some murky waters if there is malpractice as far as the apprehension and how we are doing the deportations.
I was looking at voluntary return, but we need EOIR, the immigration courts need to reestablish last cases first, right? Those immediate cases that came across the border, litigate them first. But immigration judges, we need more immigration judges, and I think more action on the most violent first, right? Let's concentrate on the criminal aliens. But under current structure, those who are in detention get a hearing within like 40 days. If you're not in detention, it could take 5 to 7 years. So we need to make sure ICE continues doing what they're doing. Focus on the public safety threats, national security threats, lock them up, detain them, because they get attention first. So we got to just expand on what we're currently doing and put more bad guys in detention and have the hearings done quickly.
Now, this is something I do find rather interesting, and again, I don't think this is good for Democrats. Once you start to see from the Trump administration, even Tom Homan is saying or implying he would like due process as far as faster processes. And for anybody who's ever been to prison or jail, or we've all heard this, I've never been to either, what I want to say is we know that the court system can be drug out or take a very long time. So the point Tom Homan is trying to make is he doesn't want this to happen, and they want more immigration judges. But again, under no obligation do they technically, if they are under the TCP, do they even have to go to a due process? Because what's the process here? We know what the law is, and once that's up, that's it, you get deported. So as you can see, I know it can be a little misleading from all sides, even from the Republican side, but again, we are seeing some notions or implications that it's not that the Trump administration is against due process or giving out the names. There's just no legal obligation, especially when it comes to the privacy of these illegal immigrants. I've talked about it a lot. If you start giving out all the names, now you're taking away the privacy of the illegal immigrants, even though they don't have any privacy laws. So we can't have it both ways, and we all know this, the American system always drags out in everything we do. It's just the way it goes. So anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned something. I'm definitely learning something. I'm really uncovering a lot. But that Grok answer really, I wouldn't say it shook me, but it's definitely a little eye-opening how everything really seems to be up to self-interpretation. Let me know how you guys feel about all of this. God bless, and we'll see you guys later.